Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Ari Raivetz. He is the CEO and chairman of Transcend. He has more than 20 years of experience across finance, corporate strategy, marketing, and public and private equity investing. He was previously the chairman and CEO of Organica Water, a next-generation wastewater treatment technology provider that enables localized treatment and reuse. Under his leadership, they went from 30 reference facilities in mostly one country to over 130 across 20 and led their Series A through B funding rounds. And before that, he was the head of water private equity investment at Organica Capital, a pioneering environment investment firm with over 800 million in assets under management. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
So, for the sake of our guest, can you walk me through what Transcend is all about?
Sure. So Transcend automates the preliminary engineering for really any kind of infrastructure, but starting initially with water and wastewater treatment facility design. And so what that means is typically when you have a problem related to water scarcity or you need to treat or recycle wastewater, there's a long planning process that happens. And in the beginning of that process, there's preliminary engineering. We call it the first 30% of a design. And that's typically a very manual process taking hundreds or thousands of hours and weeks to accomplish. And our software does that with just a click of a button. So ultimately, asset owners can get better outcomes, more sustainable infrastructure. And that's basically what we do.
Can you walk me through the part that you just mentioned that the manual component could take thousands of hours? What is it that takes thousands of hours that you believe could be automated?
So if I am a utility or any kind of asset owner, even Google, who owns various water treatment facilities, or I'm an engineering firm that was hired by an asset owner like a utility, or I'm a technology provider that sells technology that goes into one of these facilities, and there's a potential opportunity. There's multiple engineering steps that have to happen before I can determine the size of the facility, the potential capital cost, the potential operating cost, how it's going to fit into a site. And typically what happens is you'll have a process engineer sitting at a computer doing simulations and all kinds of calculations in an Excel spreadsheet or in their own spreadsheet, and third-party simulation softwares as well. Then they hand that over to a mechanical engineer who selects and sizes all of the equipment, the pumps, the pipes, the valves, the motors. That goes to an electrical engineer who then has to say, okay, how much power do I need to run this thing for each piece of equipment and ultimately for the whole facility? Then that goes to a civil engineer and sometimes to an architect who says, how do I put all of this stuff into a building on an existing site so that I can make it work properly and also fit into that space on the site. So that process typically takes weeks and hundreds of hours per iteration. Usually you're doing multiple iterations before you find the right outcome. And it's a huge bottleneck for all three of those groups that I mentioned.
And these bottlenecks are, how many edge cases are there? I imagine there must be a lot of different ways that these sorts of plants are operated.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple technologies that can be used for treating wastewater or for treating drinking water or clean water. And one of the biggest problems in the industry is that because that process takes so long, and typically it's a non-billable process.
I see.
So it's happening early in the cycle before a project is funded. Engineering firms that are contracted to do it usually have very limited budgets to do that. And the technology providers are expected to do it for free in order to ultimately sell their equipment, their technology later. So it's a bottleneck for all three groups, and they don't evaluate enough options. And that's one of the reasons why you see all of these issues with the droughts right now, which is, we call it a drought, but in reality, it's just a permanent state of affairs now for the Western United States, and it's going to be that way forever. we don't design infrastructure to meet the needs of our current situation, and a lot of the reason is because we don't evaluate enough options.
And who would you say is the target customer of Transcend? Like
All three groups. Yeah, it's all three of those groups. So engineering firms that are hired by an asset owner to design a facility, the asset owners themselves, there are a number of them that either are developing new projects and want to make their own assessments in-house, or who would like to have some cost savings or better evaluation of multiple options, because ultimately they're going to own and operate that asset for 30 years, and so they're stuck with the outcome. And then the technology providers who are trying to sell their technology into these projects and have to provide engineering around that. All three are in our customer base today.
Do you have a ballpark of how much a typical customer saves, either as like an absolute dollar amount or percentage, compared to like a more traditional manual flow?
It's about 90% savings relative to the manual process.
And when you, how do you find these users to adopt your platform?
So we started Transcend about 18 months ago, in December of 2019. And a month later, the world completely flipped upside down. So it's been an interesting time to start a new company, for sure, because we've had to do everything remote. Lucky enough to have a great founding team, Steve Davis, our COO, and Adam Tank, who's our head of digital transformation, really started this journey with me inside my prior company, Organica Water, and we're part of the initial spin out we had. And so the three of us have good relationships in the industry, and that's how some of our clients have come. LinkedIn's a very useful tool for us, so we're able to find a lot of people there. And really just through a lot of networking and kind of word of mouth. That's been at least our initial, customer base, because we haven't been able to get out, to meet people. So, yeah.
How much overlap do you see between Organica Water, like their community and the network you've been able to build through them, and the community you have at Transcend?
I mean, water's a pretty small world.
Okay.
So at Organic, I was able to, meet a ton of people in the industry, really across the world, and there's definitely a good amount of overlap. The only thing I would say is Organica's customer base was primarily in Asia and the Middle East and a bit of Eastern Europe, whereas Transcend is primarily focused today on North America and Western Europe. There isn't as much crossover, but I think in the future, as we expand geographically, there'll be even more.
What led you to see the opportunity with Transcend to be so tremendous that you think it's worth all of your while to be full-time dedicated to this versus Organica?
So when I previously had a background as a private equity investor, primarily focused on water technologies. And before that, I knew nothing about water. Came from the oil and gas side of the energy industry, and then enterprise software. So I started my career doing ERP and supply chain software, and then later CRM software implementations for all kinds of actually software companies, enterprise software companies that were using CRM to drive enterprise sales. So I started to look at water as an investor, and like the thing that just shocked me was there were literally thousands of startups, and a lot of them had proven technologies. They'd been around for decades. They had 30 or 40 pilot projects, but they could never take their technologies and really scale the business so that they could bring it full scale and help solve all of these water scarcity issues that we read about and that were kind of the basis for this fund that I worked on and the fundraising behind it. So why is that, right? Well, when I moved 3 years later to Budapest, I was recruited by the founders to move to Hungary to run Organica, which was founded in Budapest. I realized that it took us as Organica over 300 hours just to bid on a project. And we weren't getting paid for that work.
Yeah.
And it was 5 different people. And it was taking us weeks to get back to clients when they had a request. If we were lucky, maybe we could bid on 15 projects in a year. And Organica has this revolutionary technology for wastewater treatment. It looks like a botanical garden. It has no odor. Wastewater plants are typically like smelly, disgusting buildings that you would not want to live near. And Organica puts that right in the middle of a city. And with that, you can recycle the water because you're right next to the people that created that waste. And right next to that people. They had this great technology was proven, but maybe we could bid on 15 projects a year. So at Organica, I realized that if we didn't find a way to automate that process, the company wouldn't have been able to scale and survive. We couldn't afford to hire an army of engineers. It was a new technology for the industry, so we had to bid on a lot of deals in order to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really where the idea for Transcend came from. Going back to my software, where I had seen ERP automate supply chain planning processes and procurement processes. And I had seen CRM automate marketing and lead gen processes. So why couldn't we automate preliminary engineering? That was really where the idea came from. And then it worked at Organica. The company was able to, grow by a factor of 10 in less than 4 years. By using the software, it could bid on, hundreds of projects per year, respond to clients instantly, give clients 4 options, and iterate over and over again. So that really helped Organica grow. And so I kind of went back to the private equity and said, what about all these other startups? Right? Like, couldn't we use the same software to help spread innovation in this industry faster? And that was really what gave me the idea and the confidence to lead. So, a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's the story.
So, when you first started, how did you know how to price it for other companies?
It's experimenting. I mean, a big part of it is how much money does it cost them today to do this? And that was kind of our initial thinking. And then how much could they save by using the software? And we want to capture a portion of that savings. But over time, what we've learned is it's actually less about the cost savings and more about the ability to grow.
I see.
Because this is a bottleneck for growth in all 3 of those types of companies. They just, if I'm a tech provider, I can't bid on enough deals or respond to clients fast enough. And if I'm an engineering firm, I don't want to use non-billable hours to go pursue new business. So I can do very limited engineering work when I'm pursuing new business. And so we've learned over time that it's actually, very useful as a growth tool in addition to the cost savings that come with it.
Do you remember the first thing that led you to go from the world of private equity investments into the world of actually being an operator yourself?
So I really started my career as an operator. I spent a year doing my own startup out of undergrad, which was kind of an e-commerce play in the late 90s. And then I had worked at multiple enterprise software companies in kind of the ERP supply chain world. When I went back to business school, I had a lot of loans when I got out of business school. And so I went to work as an equity analyst at Bank of America so I could pay back those loans.
Okay, I see.
And I guess, around the time that I'd paid off the loans, I had an opportunity to leave the banking world and go to private equity and to switch from kind of the dirty side of energy, the oil and gas side, and I covered oil refineries, dry bulk shipping, all the people that are destroying the planet, raised billions of dollars for those companies when I was at the bank. So I left to go to kind of the clean tech side of the industry. And then spending a couple of years as an investor, I just found that, I liked really digging my hands in and building something as opposed to kind of sitting on the outside looking in. And when the founders from Organica kind of called me and convinced me and my family to move to Budapest, I just took the leap back. So,
Are you originally from that area?
from Hungary?
Yeah.
No, I had
Okay.
absolutely no ties at all.
Okay.
I didn't speak a word of Hungarian. Nothing related to Hungary. So
What was that transition like?
it was different. It was definitely different. I mean, at the time I moved there was 2011. Hungary's become a lot more westernized, I would say, in the past 10 years than it was then. So there were very few English speakers. You couldn't get a burger anywhere if you wanted one. And the company had a lot of English speakers because we were dealing globally. So everybody spoke English at the company. But it was a big cultural transition and cultural change. For me and my family, I moved there with my wife, and we have a 3-year-old. Well, they're now 13, but they were 3 years old when we moved to Hungary. Twin daughters. So we just packed up, left New York City, moved to Hungary to go run this wastewater business.
That's quite the move, and to take your family at it too. So my co-founder, he has 5 kids, 2 from his wife's former marriage, 1 biological with his wife, and 2 adopted kids. And I think he's effectively set. I think the idea of moving just terrifies, just a logistical nightmare with that many kids, different schools, and trying to balance out all of their needs.
Yeah. I mean, for us, for me and my wife, Lauren, it was this opportunity to go live in another country, to build a business that we cared about, the kind of environmental impact it was having, and just to have an adventure, and maybe show our kids a little bit more of the world than they got on the Upper East Side of New York. So we loved it. I mean, it was an awesome experience for the family. It was a great experience in terms of, from a business point of view, to just see how a different culture operates and learn, a lot of those things. So, and Transcend still has a very big presence in Hungary. That's where all of our software developers and engineers are based. So,
what would you say is the biggest cultural shock for you personally when you were there?
People in Hungary don't like to say no. So, I mean, I've done a lot of business in Asia as well. It's similar to some of the cultures there in that they just won't tell you no, and they won't be critical. And I tend to be pretty direct with people, and I kind of grew up in working environments in the U.S. where people told you no all the time, no matter where they were on the totem pole. And that was hard for me. And I had to learn how to tease out that kind of information. And it took years to learn that. And to be honest, I'm still learning it some days. But that was definitely probably the biggest, from a business point of view, culture shock. I mean, everything else, like from a personal point of view, and my kids went to an English-speaking school, but they were the only American kids in the whole grade. So, lots of different cultures and languages and everything. And yeah, I mean, I think even just like going to the supermarket was an interesting experience. So.
In terms of ranking the most difficult or challenging things you've done in your life, where would you say moving to Hungary fits in? Is it number 1?
Interesting question. Definitely. I think probably it's in the top 3. I would say. So, yeah.
What would you say is your core motivation that pushes you to do all these incredible things? Build a company, move to Hungary, try to solve the world problem of water, sanitation, and reuse.
So, did you read the IPCC report that came out this morning, or read any of the news about it?
I have not.
No idea what I'm talking about.
I have. That is a correct assessment.
Cool. So basically, the report that came out this morning from the IPCC, which is the organization since 1986 that has kind of assessed global warming and the impact that it's having on the planet, came out this morning and said that we will cross crucial temperature thresholds as early as 2030, which is 10 years earlier than they thought in the last report, which was 4 years ago. We're talking about less than 9 years from now when we're going to cross these temperature thresholds that we're trying to avoid. And, we see what's happening with the fires all over the country, but especially on the West Coast. I talked about the drought earlier. This is really the defining kind of event. It's a series of events of the next 100 years. And so for me, in 2007, my daughters were born, and that same year I finished paying off my business school loans. And I just kind of made a choice then that whatever I do, it's going to be to help contribute in some small way to fixing that problem. That's what Organica was about, kind of spreading this wastewater recycling technology. And now Transcend is saying, look, if we can automate preliminary engineering, we can really accelerate innovation, because you can assess 40 different options at the beginning of a project and find the one that's going to have the best impact on carbon footprint. And so that's really what drives me and motivates me. Is anything I can do to make my kids and their kids' life better, and try to undo some of the damage that we've done in the past couple hundred years.
Was that time when you finished paying off the debt? Was that the time where you felt like this mission became really important to you?
It definitely gave me some freedom where I just said, okay, I can start to do more. And my kids were born at the same time. So you're looking at these two little babies, and like you spent the past 3 years of your life in Texas and in Arkansas, watching the oil and gas companies fracking and going to oil refineries all over the U.S. and seeing what it takes to turn that crude oil into usable fuel, and watching the oil tanker companies ship coal and steel all over the world. And it's just like, I have to do something. What's the point of working, especially as hard as I do, if you're not going to have some kind of impact on, your kid's future? So that was kind of when it all clicked for me.
So if you draw it down to like the micro, of just like example of a given day, what does it take for you in a given day to feel a sense of accomplishment towards that goal?
Very goal driven. So, Transcend has a clear mission, and we split it up into what our goals are going to be for on an annual basis, and moving to kind of a quarterly basis. And then for me personally, I usually have goals on a weekly basis. And so I'm just trying to knock them off and kind of, put those building blocks in place, take a step forward every single day or every single half day even, so that we can work towards that mission of, accelerating innovation through design automation.
Can you walk me through or give me an example of a, say, like weekly goal that you would have?
So try to think of a good one. So, for example, if we are going through kind of our sales pipeline and the prospects that are in our pipeline, there might be 10 or 15 different tasks that we've set up in order to reach that next phase, whether it's getting to a new decision maker or getting a certain message in front of the right person, or doing a demo for somebody, or getting a proposal out the door, or doing a pricing. Those are the kind of tasks that are driving us forward commercially from a sales perspective. And then, so that'll kind of be like one portion of my list within a day or a week. And the second is going to be about people.
Hmm.
So that's going to be either from a hiring point of view. We did a capital raise back in May, so we've been doing some hiring. So, checking boxes in terms of, are we filling these positions? Where are we on those? Can I help people if they need help finding the right candidates? How are we assessing them from that point of view? And then for the existing team, just making sure I'm talking to people, especially in a remote environment like we've been in for the past 18 months with COVID. Setting up short video calls with people and just kind of checking in and seeing how people are doing. Those are kind of like always the two biggest priority categories for me: the sales and the team.
How different is that from your role at Transcend? So sorry, how different is your role at Transcend from Organica Water? Because I recognize you're going from a more mature company into a more budding company. Like how different is your day to day?
In some ways, it's similar to the early years of Organica because I was out doing a lot of kind of selling with the company that time as well. And then in some ways, it's really different. I would say the biggest difference, the third kind of aspect of my job is connecting the product and the dev teams with that customer feedback. And I'm very much hearing it all the time on sales calls or calls with existing clients or updates with the team who are dealing with those two aspects. And then making sure that gets across to the team from a product point of view and that our work is kind of prioritized properly so that the product is being developed to where it can actually meet the needs of our client base. That's very different than selling wastewater technology like I was doing for Organica. Organica sales cycles were also very long, like multiple years.
I see.
Some projects could take 5 or 6 years. Whereas, in the software industry, hopefully it's shorter. That's the goal. So,
in the world of Transcend, how big is your team?
Our team today is about 30 people.
And how large was Organica Water when it branched off?
So when I joined Organica, it was like less than 20 people. It was about 125 people or so when it branched off, and 20 people were part of the spin-out, like the initial. So
you're working with a significantly smaller team now than in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you notice that change your operating principles in any way?
It does change the operating principles in some ways. I mean, I think that as you get bigger, obviously, by its nature, you have kind of less direct impact on things and much more of an indirect impact on things. And so I was definitely feeling that at Organica once it kind of, moved up that growth trajectory. And now, I'm in a place where I'm having a lot more direct impact. But one of the things that I've been really conscious of is, I think, when I joined Organica as CEO, I was a first-time CEO. So it was kind of like the first time I was learning and experiencing it. It was a 20-person team. And I wanted to shoulder a lot of those things myself and do a lot of stuff myself. And that doesn't really help you as you grow and scale because you lose the ability to do that. So here at Transcend, even though I could do a lot more things myself, I'm really trying consciously very hard not to in the early years of the company to make sure that we're built to scale even faster than I was able to do it. So.
What are some of the things that you learned as a leader in your previous companies that you feel like really help you now?
I think people being the priority is the number one thing that I learned and every day. At the end of the day, it's not about the market or the strategy or the product, but ultimately it's about the team that you put together and its ability to adapt to change and whatever uncertainty the market throws at you. And so spending time making sure we have the right people in place, that we're hiring the right people, that people are in the right roles, that we're structured the right way, they have the right goals, that they're happy. That's always kind of top of my priority list. And that's something that I learned along the way that I think translates to any company in any industry really. So,
What would you say are some of the traits that you consider like crucial for company leaders that you hire, or leaders that you try to foster within your own company?
I think persistence is a big one. In general, when you're selling something that's disruptive to the current way of doing business, which is what we do, right? I mean, there's a manual process that happens today when people are doing design, and all of a sudden you can hit a button and you get the exact same output that was taking weeks. So it's totally disruptive to the industry that we're involved in. And so you have to be persistent to be able to kind of find your way through that. Creative as well. So people that really think outside the box and are looking to find solutions to problems that don't exist today and aren't based necessarily on some precedent, but some original idea that they've come up with. And passionate. So people that really care about what we do and what they're doing and take pride in the work. Those would be kind of the three things, I guess.
Do you have a secret sauce on how to find such people or how to foster them?
Still learning.
Okay.
Still learning it. We've tried a lot of new strategies at Transcend. I can't share them, but I think definitely started to crack some of that to find those right people. So.
And as you try to do all these things for your company, I imagine you're quite like the hustler personality type. How do you balance that with your personal life?
You learn to draw lines. That was something I had to learn, at Organica and before that as well in my life. So you just have to draw lines because there's always more to do. So you have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to stop and, spend time with family. And then you have to learn to really shut off your brain because you can be not at work, but mentally you're still at work. And that happens a lot. And you have to be able to just shut it off and say, okay, I'm going to come back to it tomorrow. And I think one of the things that, I've learned over the years, it was really hard to do that before, like early in my career. And one of the things that I've learned is that by doing that, sometimes you're even more productive. Because you think of by shutting off and then coming back on, you all of a sudden see it from a new angle and a new perspective. The same way that sometimes when you go on vacation and you come back, that happens. That can happen on a daily basis. But it took a while for me to get that confidence that it would actually be beneficial. So I think that's important. And yeah, I mean, just enjoy the things you do outside of work too, right? I mean, I enjoy those things. So spending time with my family, hiking. We try to get outdoors as much as we can on the East Coast. So,
do you set a minimum amount of holiday to take off per year to encourage this creativity and rest?
Well, we're just really flexible about it.
Okay.
So it's kind of up to people what they want to do. We try to be as flexible as possible when it comes to that. In Hungary, there's certain kind of regulations that are on the labor code that we have to follow. In the U.S., obviously, we have some as well. But we generally want people to work when they're going to be happy and productive, and if they're not, they shouldn't be at work. So they should be, doing other things. So we try to be as flexible as we can.
And I recognize you're relatively early in your journey at Transcend, but what are some things that you wish you knew, call it like 3 to 5 years ago, that you've been learning recently?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think that COVID really accelerated digital innovation in the infrastructure and engineering design industry. It's a very old school industry. Generally, people sitting at computers doing stuff on their desktops, but they were forced to work in these big kind of 3D models and CAD files remotely and in the cloud. And I think it opened up a lot of minds to the ability of technology to help kind of make them more efficient. And that has helped from the perspective of starting a business during COVID. I think that whenever you're dealing with an automation software, and I dealt with this with both ERP and CRM, people are afraid that the software is going to take their job. We get it all the time where people say, what am I going to do? We call it like the burger shop. The burger shop question, which is, okay, this is great. Your software works. What am I going to do? Go open a burger shop now? But in reality, whenever these kind of innovations are introduced, we see productivity gains in industry. We saw it with ERP and supply chain and accounting. We saw it with marketing. And can you imagine what online marketing would be without CRM? It just takes time for people to realize that, and they get worried about it. But in the end, their skills get repurposed to much more value-added tasks, and that's really what our software is doing for our customers. But some of the messages that we have to use when we're trying to communicate that, it's taken some time to find those messages. So those are things I wish I knew.
Either on the marketing side or on the product side, are there any pursuits that you feel like you've taken within Transcend that and now in hindsight, feel like you chased for too long and should have pivoted earlier?
There's probably a few, but it's probably too early to tell.
Okay.
Given where we are right now. And there's probably a few that, like, if you ask me at this moment in time, did we spend too much time last year on X? Probably, yeah, we did. But I think that's expected, right? When you're trying something new and you don't really know how your customers are going to react, your ability to be successful is more about how fast you can adapt than it is about being right in what your educated guess is going to be about the product. And so, I think as soon as we get information, we pivot, and that's exactly what we should be doing as we try to find a way to introduce this product to the market.
Do you have any advice you'd give to soon-to-be founders or early-stage founders in general who might be watching this episode?
I would say definitely make sure you're doing it for something beyond just the money. Do it for whatever you're passionate about, whatever you care about, but make sure that that's kind of a driving, motivating factor, because at the end of the day, it's not about the financial side and the big numbers you read and funding rounds and all of that, but it's really about building something, which is hard work. It's doing construction, putting your hard hat on, and going every day, and kind of laying every brick. So that would be, I guess, probably the biggest advice I give.
Okay, sounds good. I have one last question. What's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you and follow you along your journey?
Follow us on LinkedIn, Transcend, our website, transcendh2o.com. But definitely follow us on LinkedIn. We're very active on there. Share a lot of information, customer stories, and content. So it's definitely worth checking out.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining us on the show, Ari.
Thanks for having me, David. Appreciate it.